Okay, I think we're going. Morning, everyone. Thanks for turning out. Hope everyone, thank you, Jim. Hope everyone's having a good synergy so far. Welcome to SYN229, Citrix Cloud Deployment, Customer and Partner Perspectives with Shane O'Neill and Paul Stansel.
Morning, everybody.
I'm the customer, he's the partner. So hopefully we'll have something that will interest everyone today. This one doesn't work.
Your clicker not clicking?
No.
Neither's mine. Clickers not clicking.
This is off to a good start. All right, so who am I? I'm Shane O'Neill. I'm an engineer advisor working for CVS Health. I'm based in Ireland. I had the privilege of being named in the CTP class this year. I work with large Citrix deployments. I like to write automation tools, and I'm the owner of a number of community tools. I contribute on Citrix.com whenever I get the chance, and I work with both Citrix Cloud and deploying Citrix into Azure.
Yeah, still not working. All right, I guess we'll do it by hand. And who am I? I'm Paul Stansel. I am a CTP. I've been in the CTP program for the last 5 years or so now. I've architected and implemented multiple Fortune 100 companies. I've got 22 years of working with Citrix products, so I go back a little ways. I've been an author, an editor. I own CitrixTips.com, where, like Shane said, we very infrequently post, I admit. And I'm currently serving as the director for Presidio's National End User Compute practice. So we support, obviously, a large amount of Citrix as well as other end user compute technologies. Is that one? Nope.
Nope. It would happen, wouldn't it?
Yep. Is that working now?
Is that working now? Clicked it?
Anyway.
Yep. There we go. All right.
Go back. Okay. Are we good?
Yay!
Thank you. Thank you. Big up.
How many engineers does it take to work a clicker?
Please feel free to tweet about today's session with the hashtags here, and there's also myself and Paul's handle. I'm Irish, you can't insult me. Please, good or positive, say it. All slides and notes will be available afterwards on citrixtips.com and on the Synergy site.
And by the way, you can insult him, just call him English, not Irish.
Our session content for today. So a year ago, Paul and I presented as well where we talked about Citrix Cloud. So we're going to just give a look back to where Citrix Cloud was a year ago, where it is now. Then I'm going to talk about some of my customer perspectives from working with Citrix Cloud, specifically around how it's helped with domain consolidation, MFA, and for workload power management. Paul's going to cover his perspectives, which include traffic routing, the gateway servers, and why you should use Citrix Cloud. And then we'll be wrapping it up with an update to some tools that we have out there that can help you migrate to Citrix Cloud. So with that, Paul.
Great. So were any of you here a year ago when Shane and I did this? All right. Well, a couple. Yeah. If you were, you probably know that I might have had some unkind things to say. I might have made some product managers a little unhappy. I gave this slide last year as pros and cons for Citrix Cloud. The good news is the pros are still the same pros. It is evergreen for the components that are in the cloud. It is absolutely the first platform to receive updates. You do eliminate some of your SQL management headaches and licensing, which is a big deal for a lot of customers. You do have at least a 2-year hybrid use rights to migrate up to Citrix Cloud in most cases. If you hit your rep up, he might even give you 3 or longer. And cost. And cost could be a pro, cost could be a con. We'll talk a little bit about why that is later. Last year, I also had a pretty long list of cons, which were significant barriers to adoption. The good news is everything that was on my list last year, it has been fixed. So when I look at Citrix Cloud now, a year from where we started, seriously looking at implementing it, it is a viable platform for our customers, which is a great change of pace. I just want to talk through some of the fixes that they put in because, not everybody follows all the blogs all the time. You might not realize what some of them are. The first is configuration logging. So if you run a highly regulated industry, You probably have to have configuration logging on as part of your deployment. If you are on-prem today, configuration logging, you've got a bunch of different options about how you can set it up, how you can export the data, what you can do with it. In Citrix Cloud, configuration logging is just on. There is no turning it off. It is there, it is on, and that's a great thing because we had a lot of financial industries customers that were unwilling and unable to go to Citrix Cloud because of the lack of the configuration logging. So once you've got it enabled and you want to export it, the export process is a little bit different than what you can do with on-prem. You can't dump it to an HTML like you can with the on-prem product. You have to dump it to a CSV and then take that data and manipulate it however you want. You've got to use PowerShell to do the export, so the commandlets are pretty simple. You just need to look them up. Citrix has them all documented. But that is a great feature, and it is there now on by default, which is excellent. Delegated administration was another huge area that we saw a lot of customers hesitant to go to Citrix Cloud because it lacked delegated administration. So you now have the ability to do delegated administration. We see a lot of customers that have help desk roles, et cetera, that they want to define. They didn't want everyone to be full admin, which a year ago you had to be. With the delegated administration and the built-in roles that exist today, there is a lot of flexibility that you can give to your various levels of administration. The thing you need to be aware of is Citrix Cloud Identity and Access Management is handled from the cloud control plane itself. So in the old days, on-prem, the old days, most of you still probably are on-prem, you were running your delegated administration from your administrators in the configuration. Today, that has to be run out of the identity and access management portion of the Citrix Cloud plane instead. So it's not in Studio that you're actually creating these administrators and then assigning them the roles. So you're going to be bouncing back and forth between identity and access management and then Citrix Studio itself to create and then define the delegated administration roles. And I know it's a little bit of an R chart. Man, that didn't blow up very well. But you can see there's lots of built-in roles that exist. Now, that's important. There is no custom role. You can't create custom administrator levels. You have to use the built-in roles that Citrix provides you. But they are pretty comprehensive in terms of how they break down. The third area that Citrix has improved on is scopes. So last year, this time, scopes did not exist. Scopes are kind of a take it or leave it for a lot of customers. Some of them use them extensively. When I'm dealing with large corporations, a lot of them have line of business help desk. So a specific line of business will have Citrix. They'll be siloed into their own delivery groups and all. They want their help desk administrators to only be able to administer that line of business support. That didn't exist last year. You were either an all or nothing, right? So now, again, we can create scopes and we can assign those scopes, but much like the delegated administration, you're going to be bouncing back and forth between identity and access management and the console to create the scope and then assign the scope to users. So when you create an administrator user and you look in identity and access management after you've created scopes, you'll see there is now a new role specific to the scope you created. What that means is every time you create a scope, every one of those built-in roles for delegated administration gets its own list here, or line here. So you're going to end up, if you use scopes a lot and you use delegated administration, you're going to end up with a whole host of entries here. But that's the only way you can do it today. Still, much better than not having it at all.
Okay. So my first perspective that I want to talk about as a customer was for domain and resource location consolidation. Now, if you're like me and you work for a large enterprise customer, you're going to have numerous farms. Over time, you're going to have M&A activity. You're going to have farms that, whether for business separation reasons, for legal reasons, compliance, or just really paranoid security people, you may have no trust between domains. You might have one-way trust between a domain. And you're going to end up with all these scattered legacy environments that you're going to have to manage. And this is going to create additional burden on your resources, on your people, because now they got to duplicate effort. If you want consistency across your farms, you set your policies in one. Oh, I got to go set it here, I got to go set it here. You might be maintaining multiple storefronts, multiple net scalers. You're going to have many delivery controllers. So the problem is, how can I bring all that together and make it much easier to manage? And that's where Citrix Cloud can really help with that. Because Citrix Cloud doesn't care about domain forest trust, right? You install your cloud connectors in the domain into a resource location, and straight away, that forest is available for you in Citrix Cloud. And all the domains within that forest are available for you as well. And that means you can bring the management of all those farms into the one single control plane. So now, if I need to make a policy change, it's just inside there, and I can make sure it applies to whatever zones, and boom. So I've made my life much easier straight away. Now, there is also the additional benefit that that's going to bring you, because that will also feed into Workspace if you're using Workspace. So you don't have to maintain a separate URL or netscalers or something if you're using the gateway service now as well. The users will, once the domains are available in Citrix Cloud, in Workspace, I can go there and I can log in with any of those domain credentials now, and I will then be able to get to my resources there. So definitely for a bigger customer, if you've got, as I said, many farms scattered around the place, and you struggle to figure out how I can bring these together, this is the way to do it. The one example I will give is, we had an acquisition, and we got a farm that had 10,000 seats in it. And we were told, don't worry, 18 months, those apps will all be migrated into our own data center. You don't have to do any upgrades, anything to it. That was 6 years ago. Usage has increased by 25%. And so there was nothing I could do with that. I dropped in a couple of cloud connectors. I can manage it now straight away in Citrix Cloud. I have a gateway that those users can log into, as well as my regular production users. So definitely something to consider if this is a problem that you struggle with. Citrix Cloud could really help you with that.
So now I'm going to talk a little bit about a negative. My apologies if anybody gets offended, but we need to talk about traffic routing. So Workspace today is an excellent product. I hope you are all looking at it. It is definitely the future of Citrix. The problem with Workspace today is that it has no methodology to differentiate between your internal and your external users. So, if you are an external user, you connect to Workspace through the through the gateway service. Had to catch myself there. Through the gateway service, and that routes you obviously through the Workspace config to whatever your resources are, and then they go back out through the gateway service and back to your endpoint. If you are an internal user, it does the exact same thing. You must use today the gateway service if you are trying to service both internal and external users. This diagram, by the way, is in Daniel Feller's Visio and PowerPoint templates, so it's Virtual Feller. If you ever go to his website, he's got a ton of great diagrams and Visio stencils and all, and this is one of them. The problem there is I could be sitting physically next to the machine that's hosting my VM, and it's going to go out to the closest point of presence over the public internet for the gateway service, back to the Workspace services, back to my machine, and then back around again. That's hairpin traffic at its worst, and it will drive your network administrator crazy in most cases because they hate seeing things like that. It's terrible in terms of packet efficiency. So what are the solutions for that? Is there a fix? Use NetScalers in Storefront. Unfortunately, that is the fix, and I can tell you as a consultant that's doing hundreds of these a year, we are still doing 90+% NetScaler in Storefront, and one of the primary reasons, not the only reason, but one of the primary reasons is this hairpin traffic problem. It's enormous. Customers don't want anything to do with it. They want to be able to differentiate. If I'm sitting local on internal network to my virtual machines, I should be able to go straight to that virtual machine. I should not have to be doing this crazy loop, and they're right. You can use Workspace only for internal or only for external. That's another option. So if your user base is serviced entirely externally, for example, then you're great, or entirely internally, you're great. It's only when you have to use it for both circumstances that you've got a problem. Or you can just wait. Citrix is sorting this out. They will have it sorted hopefully soon. I have no promised timelines, but I know they are working on it, and I know the fix that they're working on, and it will solve the problem for sure. But until they get this problem solved, it's a big one if you're looking at adopting Workspace in significant numbers.
All right. Next one for me. So multi-factor authentication, obviously a very big deal for everyone. Security is something that is a priority no matter who you are. But while I think the first item I talked about was geared towards the larger enterprise customer, I think this is going to be very interesting for the smaller customers. And the reason for that is that Citrix are now providing an out-of-the-box TOTP-based MFA solution within Citrix Cloud. And that's going to be a huge benefit if you are a smaller customer and you do not have the staff, the resources, the skill set, even the money to deploy your own MFA solution. And I cannot stress how easy this actually is to set up and configure in Citrix Cloud. In the time it will take me to walk through these couple of slides, that is probably the real time it would take for you to configure this for your Citrix Cloud environment so that you can use their MFA solution. So it's very easy. You go into the Identity and Access Management section. Assuming the prerequisite is already in place that you have cloud connectors deployed and you have communication with your Active Directory, all you have to do here is locate the Active Directory and token option, click on the three ellipsis buttons, and hit connect. Very difficult. Now, the screenshot was from last week, and it says Tech Preview there. When I was in Citrix Cloud this morning, that was gone, and I got the notification that it was available, so it appears that it has gone GA. I haven't seen anything yet. I will need to check on that. But it's just that easy. So now I've configured that, and it will be available for an authentication method for me to use within Citrix Cloud and into Workspace. Next step, after I hit configure, I get the screen up to save and finish. One thing I just want to highlight on the screenshot there, it says that the user will be required to download and install the Citrix SSO app. While that is correct, it's not entirely correct, and I will explain that in a couple of slides. So once that's done, I hit save and finish, and I'm good to go. Then for another highly technical part of it, I have to enable that as my authentication method to use for Workspace. So again, go into my Workspace configuration, go to Authentication, literally hit the button for Active Directory and token. I'll get a pop-up screen saying, are you sure this will change your subscriber experience? Yes, I am. And that's it, it's done. 5 to 10 minutes for that to propagate down through your Workspace. And the next time your users access the Workspace URL, they're going to get that familiar looking screen there on the left-hand side for user, name, password, and token. Now, the great thing about this then is I don't have to do any pre-enrollment for my users for them to use MFA. It is a pure self-service solution for them to do it. So the user doesn't have a token. They're going to click on the Do Not Have a Token link. And it brings them to the screen on the right where they can enter their domain and username. Something to point out here, that is going to send them an email with the verification code that they're going to use as part of their MFA setup. Email is the only option that's available now. So there's nothing else. So if you've got something like an administrator ID that doesn't have an email address associated with it in Active Directory, this isn't going to work for them. The Citrix are looking at adding other ones. There's been a few conversations, but as right now, email is the only one that is available, so very important to remember that.
I will add, though, you can use like external email. You can send it to Gmail. You can do, as long as it's got an attribute associated with an email address, that's all it really cares about.
Yeah, good point. Thank you. So my user gets their verification code, they're going to pop that in, enter their password onto the next screen, and here you will see it tells you you can download an app of your choosing. You do not have to use the Citrix app. You can use the Microsoft Authenticator, Google Authenticator. Myself, I use my Semantic VIP token because that's what I use for my corporate VPN. So you wouldn't find yourself in a situation where users have to have one token for maybe their corporate VPN, as I said, and a different token for Workspace. It's a token of your choice. Go ahead, scan your QR code or enter your code manually, and your token is ready to go. So in literally that length of time now, I've configured my MFA authentication method, my user has self-enrolled, and MFA is up and running. Something to point out, after you've enabled MFA as an authentication method in Workspace, you have a recovery tab that shows up now where you can go and you can reset a device for a user's token. Now, that is misleading when it says reset device because it actually doesn't do anything to the device. It just invalidates the token. It doesn't go out like and wipe it off the user's device or anything. So the token would still actually be there, it just won't work. The user would have to manually remove the token and start the enrollment process again in order to be able to log in. And just a few more points to add to it. Going back to what Paul said in his previous topic, that there is no way today to tell between internal and external traffic, so we can't whitelist any IPs from MFA. So if you turn it on, it's on everywhere, whether it's internal, external. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's what you want. You want internal users to MFA. Fair enough. But for a lot of environments, you're really going to need it for the external access. People who are internal would expect they wouldn't have to do that. If you do have your own MFA solution in place, you cannot use that today. There is a tech preview underway using NetScaler as an IDP for AAA. So they are working on getting us there, so you would be able to tie back into your own MFA solution for that. And while I have focused on talking about Citrix's new MFA solution here for this, if you are an Azure AD user, you can absolutely use that for doing MFA today using conditional access rules. That does have the added benefit now of you can set up your exclusions and your whitelisting for internal versus external using your conditional access rules. So just something to keep in mind. But as I said, for the smaller customers out there, having this out-of-box MFA solution for you now, that you can have up and running in 10 or 15 minutes, obviously that could be a huge benefit to you.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the gateway service itself because it's an important part. Obviously, I already talked about the traffic routing with Workspace. This is Jason Samuel's map. I don't know if Jason's in the audience right now, but basically what this is showing you is Citrix is running points of presence for the NetScaler gateway service around the globe. So depending on where you are, you will hit what it considers to be the closest point of presence to you when you go out to the public internet. That solution works really well in a lot of cases. One thing I will caution you to be aware of is if you are using a corporate VPN, for example, and your users are maybe sitting in another country and VPNing to the US or something like that, that will be their exit point, right? So you need to be careful about how you're doing your traffic routing. And tomorrow, Jason and I have a session specific to Azure where we talk a little more in depth about what we recommend for split tunneling and things like that around this. But just be aware they do have a large distribution of points of presence for NetScaler today. That said, what can't you do with it? And I said NetScaler again, didn't I? I'm going to get my hand slapped. So gateway service is missing any load balancing, right? So it is a basic ICA HDX proxy service. So you're not going to be able to use it like you would with your NetScalers where you want to load balance storefront or any other websites, for example. You're not going to be able to do traffic policies if you have, some advanced traffic policies or complex authentication methodology. In-factor is getting very big for Citrix and being able to differentiate, user use cases and what your scans should be, for example, things like that. You can't do any of that with the gateway service. Enlightened data transport, which is the frame hawk replacement advancement technology, very important for a lot of my use cases that I see out in the field where they're running, fairly high latency situations with packet loss. EDT makes that experience tremendously better from an HDX perspective. You cannot do EDT today through the gateway service. You obviously can't do VPN if you use your existing gateways, your ADCs for a VPN endpoint. That doesn't exist either. So really, like I said, you can't do anything other than HDX proxy. So you just need to be aware that that's what you're getting as part of that service. For the thing that it does it well under the conditions and use cases that we've talked about, but there's a whole world of stuff that people tend to use ADCs for that it's not a replacement for.
Yeah, okay. So my final customer perspective that I wanted to cover, and while my first one I think was for larger customers, and then the MFA was talking about smaller customers, I think this applies to everyone across the board if you run any kind of workload in Azure or AWS. Now, before I could talk about autoscale, I got to talk about SmartScale. And if you don't know what SmartScale was, or I should say is, it is one of the features in the Smart Tools suite that allowed you to proactively scale up and scale down the number of machines that you have powered on in your Zen app or Zen desktop site. You could have a set schedule, at 9 a.m. I need 20 machines up, and then at 10 p.m. take them down to 5 machines. Or you could do it on load, more users are logging on, we spin up more machines, less users are logged on, we start scaling them down. And it worked for both AWS and Azure, and you could do it on site with Zen Server as well. Now, why is that very important to be able to do that? Because every second that you are running a machine in Azure or AWS, it is costing you money. So, why would you have all these machines running and costing you money? That's just crazy. So you want to be able to just use what you need to in order to fulfill your users' needs. Problem with SmartScale? SmartScale go bye-bye. So at the end of the month, it is going end of life. And it's going to be replaced with autoscale. And autoscale is pretty much same as SmartScale. You can set your schedules, the time of the day of the week, how many machines you want, or you can set up your capacity buffers for the number of users to do it. One little thing I do like in this screenshot is at the bottom, there's a field that you can put in the machine cost. So if you actually know how much a machine costs you per hour, you can put it in there, and it'll spit out some metrics in the monitoring section, I think, to tell you how much money you're saving. So what's the big deal with with autoscale? It's only going to be available in Citrix Cloud. So if you have got your controls in your farm on-prem today and you have a workload in Azure or AWS, you will not be able to do this kind of power management with them anymore after SmartScale is gone. If you need to be able to do this and you want to use autoscale, you're going to have to be in Citrix Cloud. A lot of people aren't happy about that. That's the way it has gone. I know there are some scripts out there that people are working on to try, community-based, to try and do something around this. So something very important to remember in the coming weeks.
All right, so I've obviously had a few negative things to say. So let's talk about why Citrix Cloud, because there are legitimate reasons to do Citrix Cloud in your environment today. It's a good thing. That's a change in perspective for me for a year. The SQL management, like I talked about, we have a lot of customers that love Citrix Cloud if for no other reason than they don't have to buy and manage SQL. That's a big deal for a lot of small customers. I will say, if you want to use PVS, you must still have your own SQL environment for PVS, because that is not hosted in the cloud at this point in time. Scaling, like Shane talked about, is tremendously easier. When we do multi-geo, multi-DC, hybrid cloud, customers that want to use Azure for this workload and AWS for that one, or DR sites in the cloud, Citrix Cloud makes all of that a lot easier to manage from a single point than it used to be. You know, even using zones with the on-prem product and trying to extend out, there's all sorts of complexity in designing that solution that the cloud connectors and the Citrix Cloud control plane definitely help you with. Security analytics. Citrix talked a lot about analytics this week, including the new performance analytics stuff, which is great. This is good stuff. If you aren't looking at this as part of your deployments, you really need to be, because that analytics engine is taking all of that data and it's giving you useful information back, which is not always something that you get from monitoring tools, right? It is useful, actionable information. So definitely be looking at security analytics and the new performance analytics. And then I'm a huge fan of Intelligent Workspace. You know, when we look at Citrix where they are today, where they've been for 30 years, because this is, by the way, the 30th anniversary, even though they didn't print any t-shirts this year. 30 years of Citrix, it's been virtual apps and desktops, right? Intelligent Workspace breaks that mold. It is outside of that space. It is penetrating into users that never would have cared about Citrix before and making their life easier. And then you combine that with analytics. Now your analytics engine isn't just watching your virtual apps and desktops, it's watching all of your Intelligent Workspace users, and you're getting all that information, and you can act on that data. So it becomes a much larger picture when it all plays together nicely. And that's really the vision that I think Citrix is trying to execute moving forward, and they're doing a really good job with it. The one thing I will say is this: uptime. Citrix publishes their uptime numbers. They have a target of 99.5% monthly, but we have to caveat that just a little bit. So here's the thing. Citrix Cloud, as you probably all know, runs on Azure instances today, right? So what happens when Citrix Cloud has an outage? Well, Citrix Cloud is down. What happens if Azure East has an outage? Well, Citrix Cloud is down. So Citrix's uptime metric of 99.5% only includes their own products. That's fair. They can't be responsible for Azure. But if you are in an industry that has to have brutally high uptime, you need to be aware that that number is a little misleading, because they don't count outages by other vendors like Azure as part of their uptime metrics. So just a little gotcha.
All right, go back.
Sorry.
So this is the part of the show where it's time for some shameless self-promotion. So a couple of years ago, we did a session at Synergy in Las Vegas. We talked about migrating VMs from one Zen desktop farm to another. And out of that, we created a tool for that called the Zen Desktop Farm Migration Tool. Now, since then, it's gone through a couple of different iterations. It's grown beyond what we originally thought it was going to be. I've added support for disaster recovery, migrations from on-prem into Citrix Cloud, and then last year added support for migrating VMs between the different Citrix Cloud regions. So I'm going to be releasing a new version of it in the next couple of weeks. Just got to get back to Ireland and squish a few bugs in it first. It's going to be rebranded as the Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop Migration Utility. That's going to make a brilliant acronym. And now I'm going to have support in it for migrating apps as well. And I'll give you a quick demo of that in a second. Two other tools that are available is the Citrix Cloud Migration Tool. What this will allow you to do is you can take the structure of your on-prem farm, your catalogs, your delivery groups, your hosting connections, capture all that information, and rebuild that in your farm in Citrix Cloud. So bit of a time saver there if you want to keep your structure identical. And the last one, and I got to tell you, this was a complete nightmare to code, the Citrix Policy Migration Tool. If you've ever worked programmatically with Citrix policies, it is a real headache to do it. But this tool allows you to take your policies, and you can move them around anywhere. You can do on-prem to on-prem, on-prem to Citrix Cloud, or Citrix Cloud to Citrix Cloud, or even Citrix Cloud back to on-prem. Who knows? You might want to do that at some stage. User guides for these are all available on citrixtips.com. And we also have a YouTube channel where I recorded a couple of demo videos, which I hate doing because I hate hearing myself talk back over video, but you know, I took one for the team. So please check those out if you think these tools may be a benefit to you. So I said I was just going to give a quick demo of the new feature that will be coming in the tool. So here I have an on-prem farm, a couple of simple applications inside it. And I want to get one of those applications over here into my Citrix Cloud farm. So I launched my CVADMT tool. See, told you to make a great acronym. There's a new apps tab that's going to be available in the tool. Put in my on-prem controller name, give it my Citrix Cloud customer ID, and just browse for my secure CSV file. If you don't know what the secure CSV file is, it is used for programmatically using PowerShell against Citrix Cloud. It prevents you having to enter credentials again and again. I validate that. It's going to check there's a valid connection to the on-prem farm, a valid connection to Citrix Cloud, reads information from both, so I can select the application from my on-prem farm that I want to move, my target delivery group that I want to associate that with in Citrix Cloud, a folder if I want to put it into one. I hit migrate, and it's going to go ahead and run all the PowerShell required to do that. I come back to my cloud farm, I hit refresh, and wow, I've got calculator available. Magic. Thank you very much.
So before you leave, I did mention tomorrow, Jason Samuel and I are doing SYN230. That's at 10:30 in C111. We're going to be talking very specifically to Citrix and Azure, both Citrix Cloud and Azure as an IaaS location. So I recommend you come out because we're going to get real in-depth there. Conference surveys obviously are very important to us as presenters, so thank you for taking the time in advance to filling it out, and hopefully you enjoyed the session today. And you can watch the session, I guess they're going to be on demand starting the 22nd. And we'll have the Synergy presentation up both on Synergy, and I'm going to put it up on citrixtips.com as well. Also, so you can rate this, you can play with the mobile app. Game on, I know everyone wants to go to lunch. And get points for your session feedback. So, questions? We got a few minutes left here. Anybody got any questions?
Nope, good.
Yeah. Oh, can you use the mic because it's a little...
Do you know if there's a time frame for EDT to be enabled?
They have not given us a time frame yet. I know it's on the list of things they need to work on, but...
Focused on workspaces and multi-factor, but what do you do in a big organization for the identity management for the console? Because it does not have two-factor, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, for the management console itself, you're either logging in with Citrix Identity, or you can use Azure AD as well. And once you're using the Azure AD, then you can get MFA around the management console as well.
Yeah, we tend to see most people, if they really want to lock it down, they're using Azure AD.
Yeah.
In regards to the 99.5% availability, what has been your recommendation for organizations that require the 999 numbers?
You cannot use Citrix Cloud as your control plane if you require 999. I'm just being honest.
But how about like adding a NetScaler on-prem and?
So you absolutely can do that. And I'll talk more tomorrow, but we have a lot of customers that are using cloud as an IaaS location, a lot of Azure IaaS, just extending it as a zone or a greenfield farm within Azure with a full build out of NetScalers and everything else, and GSLB with multi-region. So yeah, that's how we tend to see it tackled. Awesome. Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you all for coming. Appreciate it.
Go enjoy your lunch.